What's up everyone, welcome back to the channel. In today's video we are doing part 2 of how I find AI automation clients by scraping job boards. And today we're doing the actual build portion of that video, which is we're going to be looking at specifically how we're going to build an AI tool that finds AI automation clients on Autopilot. So already I've done a little bit of pre-work for this video, which I don't usually do, but I've built out a full brief.md file just so we can go over it together in the beginning so Claude knows exactly what it should be doing. And then from there, we're going to go and let it build out the entire scope. Now, this is a pretty long file. It's about 500-ish lines, 447. And we're going to go through this before I actually paste the first prompt in. But I want to stress the importance of actually doing this process before you just go out and just blast prompts into your Claude Code extension. Now, the issue with that is obviously the concept of a context window. So the more you just keep blasting prompts into this Claude Code window, the more it stacks up, and obviously the worse outputs you're going to get as a result because of its thinking process being diminishing the longer the window gets. Now, this is really helpful because like the Obsidian database, it just keeps referring back to this file every single time. So it doesn't have to keep trying to remember and go back through the chat record. It can just refer to the file directly. So I started this file by basically just stating what I wanted. So because I knew it would be a scraping project, we would need both a front end and a back end. And obviously the best framework for that is next.js because it has the backend element incorporated into the component. If we weren't using next.js and we were just using a plain React component or a React structure, we would need node.js as a separate backend to function basically the same as next.js. But next.js basically very neatly combines both the front end and the back end components together. Now, I've basically stated what I wanted. So I wanted an Indeed search URL that scrapes job listings via Firecrawl, which is such a crack tool. It's one of the only tools, if not the only tool on the market right now that actually has anti-bot detection inside of it. So if you usually do a scraper through Claude Code, whether it be through any ID, whether it be Cursor, VS Code, or anti-gravity, you'll get hit with all these anti-bot detections. But Firecrawl, if you use their web version as opposed to the local version, it has all of their own anti-bot scrapers. So it makes it really easy to scrape any site basically that your heart desires. Then I said I want it to classify each listing against 4 target roles using GPT-4o Mini. Why? Because it's cheap as opposed to using some very high-powered Claude models. And then I want to write a personalized cold email opener for each match using that GPT model and stream the results to a dashboard via the server side so that we can all see it. Now, I've said that this specifically is a single user lead generation tool, so we don't need to worry about any sort of authentication and logins and all of that other complex stuff that would add a lot more time to this. Now, then I've said I want you to not create a subfolder. Now, this is really important because often when you give a prompt to Claude, it'll go and create a folder. And that pisses me off. I don't want that. I just wanted to keep and start building in the root here. So I've already got the env.local file, so I don't have to leak any of my API keys to you guys. So it should just start building straight here. Now, I've defined the 4 roles very clearly before I've even started building. So I've got an office admin, which is like a receptionist, office coordinator, admin assistant, executive assistant, and office manager. Then an ops manager, so operations, and I've given all the sort of title variations that you may see just so we can pick up every single variant. We've got bookkeepers and sales admins as well, and anything else we don't care about for the purpose of this specific video. Now, I've said in specifics what tech stack I'm after. So like we said earlier, we want a next.js framework, and I've just said Tailwind CSS just because I find Claude Code tends to do that a little better. In my opinion, Gemini does vanilla CSS the best, but Tailwind often goes well with next.js. Then we've said we're going to use the Firecrawl SDK, and then I've also said we're going to use the OpenAI SDK as well. And all the other stuff, we said it's going to live on Vercel at the very end, and we don't need a database for this specific project. So I've gotten Claude to create a very brief structure of everything. So when you have a dot and a slash, that basically just means the root of the project. So like we've already got here, we've got the buildbrief.md, and then the app is the front end folder, essentially, which has the page, the layout, the CSS, and the API scanning, which will be where the Firecrawl stuff goes into. And then we've got the actual, sorry, that's not the Firecrawl stuff. The Firecrawl stuff is here in the backend. That's just the endpoint. Then we've got the library here with the scraper and all of the other TypeScript files that will exist, and as well as the other scrapers just in case for the personalization. And obviously we've got our package and TypeScript configuration files. Now we've also put here the 2 API keys that we need, Firecrawl and OpenAI for writing and cleaning. And we've also just given it a couple of dependencies here that it will need. Now, I've also made it very clear to give it a good idea of what success looks like. So this is for AI prompting in general. If you can show it what success looks like, you're going to get a far better result faster than if you just verbalize what you want. So whether it's a cold email you're trying to create with Claude, whether it be a skill or anything else, if you can paste it into it like a couple of screenshots of what you want it to aim for, basically, that's going to be your fastest path to success. So this is how I wanted it to separate it out. It follows a very similar structure, but it's basically the raw job listing, and these are all going to get substituted into the relevant job category. So it's got all of this is what it's extracting from LinkedIn. Sorry, not LinkedIn, Indeed, by the way. So you'll have the job title, the job URL, the title of the company, the location, and the description. And then the row down from that is the classification result. So then we'll get the match and we'll get the role category. So we'll get it to define what it is. And if it's a null, then we can avoid it. And then this will determine whether it's a qualified lead. So then we'll get the role category just to confirm, and we'll get a confidence score and a hook for the email as well. So that's personalized. And then that's just the final summarization of all that. So if we get an error, it'll get a message string, blah, blah, blah. We don't need to worry about that. Now we're actually getting into the nitty gritty of the actual modules that we're building. So the first sort of section is we're going to tackle the scraping. So this is going to live in the scraper.ts file inside of the library folder. And essentially this is just explaining to Claude what Firecrawl is and why we're using it and what sort of benefits it has and why we're using it. So we're basically saying that it's got all those stealth and weight parameters because Indeed has anti-bot sort of parameters watching it or inside of it. So if you just pull up a random playwright MCP and try and surf it and scrape the data, you're going to get hit with all these anti-bot detection bots that'll just throw you off the site basically. Then we said that we wanted to return a markdown file, and it's going to pass out individual job listings so that it can be nicely categorized like our example up here. And then we're going to get it to scrape each listing in parallel. So then I've laid out very clearly again all of the requirements. So use Firecrawl as a batch scrape, and I've given it the exact class that it should be using. Then we've set the wait time just so it doesn't sort of back up, and use the stealth proxy if it's available. Then we're capping it at 25 listings per run for now. And then we're telling it what we want it to extract. So the job title, the company name, the location, the full job description, and from each listing markdown. Then we said that we want Indeed listing URLs to match patterns like the view job that you don't need to worry about that. That's basically just the endings of all of that. And then we want to skip listings where any required field is empty. And we want it to return in the final raw job listing, which is this first variable here. So all that to say is basically we're just being really specific with Claude what we want from Firecrawl so that it's very clear in terms of the output that we want. So we shouldn't have any mix-ups as far as that's concerned. Then we also just said to close off that section with the scraper that we just want the markdown file to be passing defensively, and we want it to use regex patterns for multiple URL extractions. For those of you who haven't used make.com, this is where you'll also see regex patterns as well. If you're trying to filter data, that basically just aligns or outputs a string that you're wanting to sort of clean and decodify. Then in the Indeed listing in particular should have the markdown structure of H1 being the job title. The company name will then appear near the top as a linked element, and the location and the rest will follow. So that's basically it for the scraping part of it. Then we're going to move on to the classification part. So if you think of this more like a clay section, for those of you guys who are familiar with cold email, this is the codified equivalent of a clay table and how you clean data. So we're saying that we want the 4.0, 4.1 mini model, and we chose that because it's cheap. There's no point spending stupid amounts of money on Haiku, Sonnet, and Opus if we're just doing simple stuff like this. And for any Claude mini model is perfectly capable of handling this. So we basically said we want structured outputs with the response format and the schema, like we mentioned above, and we should never pass free-form JSON. So the system prompt that we're using for the classifier is this. So like we always talk about on the channel, when we're actually giving two different types of prompts, particularly if you're using N8N and you're coming from that background, you'll know what I mean. When you have an AI box, whether it's ChatGPT or Claude, you will have the system box and the user prompt. Now the user just basically is your usual prompt, how you would interface with an LLM in a browser. But the system is how Claude's actual backend, it's like a claude.md file. You really need to give it an identity so it actually understands what result it's trying to produce. So for here, we've said you are a listing classifier for a B2B AI automation agency. So automatically we've defined and given it an identity in the very first sentence, which is really important. Then we've said what its job is and what its role is. Your job is to determine whether a job listing represents a buying signal for AI automation services. And then we're going to list the 4 target roles again, just to be doubly sure. So office admin, ops manager, bookkeeper, and sales admin with all the variations of terms that they could see. And we've also just clarified as well what their job is. So these are people doing invoice processing, reconciliation, and all the other tasks that these relevant people would do. Now, we've also said the listings that we don't want anything to do with are like software engineers, designers, marketers, account executives, etc., etc. You can read through all that. Then we've said that the score confidence from 0 to 1 and should only return a match, particularly true with confidence, if it is above that 0.7 mark. Now, if it's unsure, we should just set it to false and we don't want to engage with it just to be on the safe side. Which is why we've also said be strict and very, very careful, because there's no point going down these leads and outreaching to them with all these custom personalization and all this kind of stuff if we're not certain of the result. So false positives also waste expensive personalization calls and emails, so which is why we're being very careful with that 0.7 number as well. So the user message, so that was the system prompt basically. Now the user message is going to contain the title, the company, the location, and the description. So we've just said limit it to 2,000 characters just to be safe. Now the filtering rule applies to the API route level specifically. Now it should keep only and match the true confidence of like basically what we just said. That's just the coded version of this stuff here. Now, module number 3 is the personalization. So using 4.1 again, not mini, just the full model this time, we're going to get a temperature of 0.7, which is usually the safest, and we've set a max of 80 tokens. Now this is the system prompt. So you're writing opening lines for cold emails sent by a B2B AI automation agency. The company or the recipient's company is hiring for a role that AI automation can partially or fully replace. And your job is to write the first line. We've put that in caps just so it really enunciates and accentuates what its job is of a cold email that, and then we're going into the list here, references something specific from their job listing. So the role that they're hiring for, a responsibility or a stated requirement. The second thing is that it connects that specific thing to the AI automation buying signal to get the score. And then the third thing is that it sounds like a thoughtful human, not just some template that you've copied and pasted from like 10 years ago. So some of the hard rules that are non-negotiable: must be under 25 words, 1 sentence only, no hey or hi, never use the phrase that saw you were hiring, know that your team is growing, all that cliche stuff. Never mention AI by name. Remember, they don't care that we use AI. As Gen Zers, presumably, if you're watching this video, we're using AI under the hood to solve normal business problems. We're still pitching that we're going to get you X amount of meetings in your calendar per month. We're still pitching all of the normal stuff that existed 5 years ago, except now we can do the implementation faster and better because AI is under the hood. So don't pitch and don't ask for a meeting. Just open the conversation. You don't bother. I also said don't bother about quotes or markdowns or emojis and any of that stuff that is weird for a formal sentence. Now I said only return the opener text with nothing else. So, and I've given it examples, like I said before, give it examples of what success looks like. So I've given them for each individual job role. So then the message or the user message now includes the role, category, company title, and description as well. And I've also given it a character limit so it just doesn't burn our API usage. Now we're getting into the meaty part of this MD file. So this is the API route section or route, depending on where you are in the world. So I've given it an example of the TypeScript about what I'm wanting to see, and it should be returning a streaming response as well. Now, I'm not going to go through this. It doesn't really matter, but it was more so for Claude to actually understand that we're wanting this request and it's going to need to inject all of these key variables that we spoke about up the top further before. And what the turning result, this is basically the codified version, for you guys just wondering, of what all this stuff is here in computer JSON language and TypeScript language that it understands, and about what each of them should return and what should be included within that. So number 5 is the dashboard. Now this is for the layman person looking at this who doesn't have a great understanding of code, and when they see a terminal like this, they freak out and they just want to turn it off. So I said I want a very single page React component with a generic clean dark theme, and I've given it a slate 950 background to be specific, and I've said I want a white text, blue accent, and I've given it some very clear design characteristic. Now I have said very specifically, because my Claude does tend to do this, it uses our workflow color branding, our workflow style guide. Now I said don't do that for now in this video. Now in terms of the layout of the page, I've just given a very brief rundown about what the header title should be. So Indeed AI Automation and Lead Finder in a 1-line subtitle. The input field for the LinkedIn search URL should be the full width and should be quite prominent on the page. Then it should run there should be a big button that says run scan that disables and shows the spinner state during the scanning. Just very basic stuff that you would expect to see on a landing page, but you don't, it's very subconscious. You don't think about this stuff happening, obviously, when it's live. So it's almost like you have to take a step back and really break down every single little thing that happens along the way. The next thing I said that there should be a status line below the button showing the current status, just so you know where it's up to. There should also be a responsive grid of the result. So a column for mobile, 2 columns for tablet, and 3 columns for desktop. And each card should show the company name, the role title, the location, the role category, badge, the confidence percentage, and the personalized hook in italics, and a view listing link, just so you can go back to it at any time. Now, reading the stream on the client should use the fetch and the readable stream, and it should pass the SSC manually. Now, I've put very specifically, I don't want to use this API because it doesn't support post, which is fine because I haven't included any API key, but just in case it tends to hallucinate. This is just a more codified version of what we just said of the JavaScript and the TypeScript. We don't need to go into that. And I basically just once again reiterated that the badge colors should be that, so it's easier to sort them when we're just looking at them at a quick glance in a dashboard. And I've also said humanize the labels as well. So office admin should go to office admin just to remove the capitalize and remove the underscore, just in case it was confused. Now, this is the actual build. So that all this stuff is basically the instructions of what I want included and the rules I want it to follow, as a typical MD file gives. Now we're getting into the actual build instructions and the order in which it should follow all of those instructions. So step number 1, we want to initialize the next.js in the current directory and run from inside this existing folder here. And I've specified again, the one that's containing this .md file, so I don't want a new subfolder. And then that's the command it's going to run to install all of this next.js stuff. So when it says when prompted, the directory is not empty, it should continue. I've preempted the question it's going to ask. So then we want to install all the dependencies. We've already got the .env file. So I'm just going to write that is already present with the API keys, because we don't need to click into that because I've already pasted them in there. Then I've just basically told it to go through and create all of the necessary pages that we're after. And this page in particular is going to run that classifier against those 3 hard-coded sample listings. And then it's going to confirm the first 2 with a match of true. Then I'm going to keep going, blah, blah, blah. You guys can read all this for yourself if you'd like. But then essentially, this is also really important as well when you're testing the endpoint. So as you go through, you can run a curl command, which basically just sends something to this address, which you can run in your terminal here. No, we don't want that news. Literally just come down to the bottom, open the terminal, and you can just paste that curl command in straight away. And that's going to tell you whether or not that that link is live and it's actually correctly receiving data. So where were we? Yes. So then we're telling it to build the UI, then we're going to polish, and then it should be visible via this localhost 3000 link. And then I've said use this for development, which is just a random a random Indeed URL, just as an example, because it doesn't really matter what link it's pulling from at the moment. We're just trying to gauge the functionality, and then you can actually tailor it to whatever ICP you're going after. Then I've given it some final critical rules. So I've said strictly TypeScript, no anything else. And I've told it very specifically what structured outputs we should be receiving from OpenAI specifically. So we've obviously told it to give us the result inside of a JSON schema, so it's more laid out, and JSON is the language that the computers understand. If you guys ever try and do image generation, quick little source for you. If you try and do image generation with like ChatGPT, because it's now way better than Claude, obviously, and it's better than Gemini as well, from my experience recently, tell it if it's struggling to like recreate your face, this is from my experience, get it to create a JSON file and codify it. We call it a context profile. Literally just say, create a JSON context profile of my face so you can more accurately replicate it in the desired output with whatever you're going for. I guarantee you, if you do that, you're going to get way better results than if you're just copying and pasting the image that you want and typing in plain English. At least from my experience, I found the results get way better when it actually codifies it. Why? Because that's the language it understands the best. It's kind of like getting Claude to prompt Claude in a way. Like if you have Claude in one tab and then you get it to prompt like your Claude code and tell it like, this is what I'm trying to get. Can you write me a nice prompt? Because it knows how to call the model the best, and then it'll just spit out this huge paragraph for you, and then you can just copy and paste that into Claude. It's a similar thing. If it actually codifies it and you're actually giving it language it understands, it's obviously going to produce a way better output than just your usually, and mine too, if you just write in plain English, it's usually missing a lot of details because we tend to overlook and overthink a lot of things. So with that being said, I think that's all that's really needing to be explained. Just some final things here about classification and personalization. But I've also told it don't delete this at any time because we need it to refer back to it. Now, this is also really important at the end because we're basically saying we don't want you to stop. So typically with an AI agent like Claude or just an AI model in general, whether we're using it through the web interface like ChatGPT or Claude, it's a very binary sort of process. It's input, output, and it doesn't really self-evolve. The beauty about this, though, is that we've basically given a whole checklist right now inside of this claude.md file before we've even started. So in a way, it really shouldn't be stopping unless it needs me to approve permissions, which is why I always put bypass permissions on because I don't want to click yes every single time. It's not needed. But basically, it should go through this document in its entirety without me having to click or do anything. So that's why I said at the end specifically, when it's gone through all that, report back when done, and then I said you should be able to answer these couple of questions. Did the fire crawl scrape pass all 25 listings clearly, or did some markdown structures fail? And if it did, show me where it happened. Secondly, was the sample classifier outputs on the 5 listings, so actually paste them and show me. And the third thing was the sample personalization outputs on 3 listings, and I want to see them as well. So that is basically, in essence, the entire brief.md file. Now we're actually going to go and build it. And I know I went in detail, particularly with this MD file, but I really want to impress upon you guys and really make you aware of the power of prompting in detail, because now my build is going to be way easier and there's going to be way less ambiguity and uncertainty now that I've actually very detailed. Like Claude doesn't have to guess now because I've told it everything it could possibly wonder about what I'm trying to build. So then the prompt is very simple to what we give to Claude. Bypass permissions is on, and like usual, we've put it at the extra high level. We don't need max. So I basically said, read this .md file in the project root. It contains the full specifications for this build. Follow it module by module in the exact order specified in this sequence. Do not skip text scripts at each checkpoint, and run them and confirm the expected outputs before proceeding. After each module successfully completes, give me a 1-line summary of what you built before moving on. And when the entire build is done, report back with the 3 flag back items at the bottom of the brief. So just like that, we can fire that off, and now we can just wait. So while that's going, it should create a checklist, which is a shorthanded version of this whole document, which it will compress. But it should follow all of this exactly. So depending on how big your structure is, if you guys at home are doing this along with me, it should take maybe 5 to 10 minutes, depending on how Claude's feeling at this time of night. There are many people using it. It might take a bit longer, but it will contemplate and plan a little bit first, even though we have given it a very clear laid out .md file. But essentially now it's going to go away and apply all of that. And the good part is as well, for the front end, actually, can I show you guys this? Let me pull this up. This might be something good for you guys to look at as well. I've been playing while that's building. We'll talk about how to get some cool front-end design stuff as well. Now, recently, I've been playing around with Claude front-end design skills and repositories from Claude specifically. Now, the annoying part I felt personally was that I had to keep copying and pasting GitHub URLs every time I found a cool repo. So what I did was I created and I added to my claude.md file, which I'm going to open right here inside of Antigravity. And we're going to push this guy over here while he's going ahead and building out all of that. And so I'm going to run you through this claude.md file, which I've updated just today, actually. And essentially, I've put all of these cool skills, which I've already added, which we'll go through in a minute. But essentially, it's a similar style or a similar structure to the main brief.md files. They all follow a similar structure. But essentially, I've just broken it into 2 parts. The first part is the actual behavioral guidelines about what it should do. And the second part is the actual skills it should utilize once carrying out anything to do with Claude. So let's just check that that's all good. Yes, it is. So I basically said a little bit about me, what I am, what are non-negotiable. So I want Australian English. I don't want M dashes because it's a dead giveaway that it's AI. And I wanted to use commas, full stops, colons, or parentheses instead of that. So I basically will just whiz through this very quickly. Basically, we've said reduce common LLM coding mistakes, blah, blah, blah. And before you start implementing, we want it to state your assumptions explicitly. If it's uncertain, ask. This is a big thing. We don't want it to just be agreeable. And so it doesn't hallucinate. That has paid so many dividends as of today, even just me using it and going back and forth with some of my other projects. We'll pause that very quickly. See how Claude Code has now created a nice little checklist of its own, which is a summarized and condensed version. And you can see it's all being built out on the side. Anyway, we'll come back to that. We'll let that build. So really important that you make sure you tell it, if you're unsure, please ask. Don't make anything up, because then we have to waste time going back and it's a whole mess, basically. The next thing is, if you have multiple interpretations, present them and don't pick silently, so I can actually give the final sign off on which version. Like if you produce an email, for example, you got A, B, and C variants, you can then say, I like version B, and go with that. Then if it's a simple approach exists, just say no and push back when warranted, so it's just not a yes man, basically. And if something's unclear, stop and then name what's confusing so I can clarify. How's that going? It's still going. Very good. So the next thing we're going to look at is the simplicity element. So the minimum code that solves the problem is what we should be going for. We don't need anything spectacular or performative. The very bare bones, simple code does the job. So we don't want any features. We don't want it to basically make up anything. We don't want any sort of flexibility. If it's 200 lines and it could be 50, we want to optimize for being concise and being efficient as much as possible. Now, I also got it to ask itself a hypothetical, like if you were a senior engineer, would you say this is overcomplicated? And if it's yes, then it should simplify. So this is almost, this is how I think about it. I'm trying to introduce an agentic level component. For those of you who don't know what agentic means, it just means the ability to think on its own without me having to prompt it like a normal binary, like AI chat window. So it's basically asking it to evaluate its own work after it's finished something. So after it's written a line of code or a complete file, it's going to ask itself, would a senior engineer say this is overcomplicated? So that's a reflection element. And if it does, then it can go back and reiterate without me having to reprompt it. And the third thing is the surgical changes. So we should only be touching this if it's like a last resort, basically. So we're telling it to not improve on stuff that it doesn't need to, match existing styles, and if it notices unrelated dead code, mention it, but don't delete it, so I can give the final tick of approval to remove. How's that Claude Code going? I can't see because something's in the way. Okay, still going. Very good. Where are we up to? Number 4, yes, goal-driven execution. So basically, I've said here that it should be transforming tasks into verifiable goals. So something like this, like a search term like add validation, really means, and I've just expanded on that, to write tests for invalid inputs and then make them pass. And I basically just dumbed it down as much as possible. Like step, verify, check, step, verify, check, step, verify, check every single time. Now, the strong success criteria is to let you loop independently. And if it's a weak criteria, it should make it work and require constant clarification until it's absolutely clear on what I'm wanting. Then if the guidelines are working and fewer unnecessary changes in differentials, and that means then fewer rewrites are required, so on and so forth. Now, the next, or part 2, is the front end work. So this is the fun part, and the most annoying part really for any developer using Claude to code is the AI slot problem with the design. You know, you get the normal 3 boxes like in the pricing section and just like in the second viewport. It's really frustrating. So I started to go for a deep dive on the entire web to find all the best GitHub repos I could. And I want you guys to go ahead and steal these, because I found that these improve the prompt, not all the way there yet, but huge improvement. So the first one was the impeccable design skill, which has been popping off recently lately, which has been great. I've also got it to include the UX UI Pro Max skill, which was sort of the first Claude design skill that really sort of popped off from GitHub. And I've also just expanded on the impeccable command syntax just to be really clear about all the different versions and all the different commands inside of impeccable that it could perform, just so it's really clear on which ones to use and which ones to call. Then number 3, we said 21st.dev. For those of you guys who don't know, that is a cool dev library, which basically has all these cool components that you can pull from and you can paste in. Actually, let me pull this up. That might be cool for you guys to have a look at. 21st.dev. It's a great tool to get some inspiration. If you're ever thinking, oh, I'm not finding a great component, what could I use? Well, this is a great option. So if you come over here, you've got some UI components already listed at the top, and it's also got some templates for you to choose from as well, which is kind of cool. This is kind of like a Zapier. It's kind of forming into a Zapier model, but essentially you can just come down to components and look at featured, and you've got all these cool stuff. So you've got that infinite grid. You've got some cool stuff. Obviously not everything's going to be 10 out of 10, but you could literally take this, for example, you could open this up and you can play around with it yourself. So that's pretty cool. Then you can literally copy the prompt or you can copy the code, or you can copy both, and just literally go back and paste that inside of your Claude. I'm not gonna lie, that is a pretty cool. That's pretty cool. So yeah, literally you can copy the prompt or you can copy the code as well to your clipboard. And then you can literally just come back inside of anti-gravity. Let me move you guys back with me. You can literally I'll just add it down the very bottom here. It's a long file. Okay, I'm not gonna paste that. Never mind. But essentially, yes, you just come in and paste it at the very end. Where were we? Where were we up to? Ah, yes, number 3, 21st.dev. So if it's missing, I'm an idiot. I've just linked that API key. Okay, I'm gonna have to edit that. Anyway, essentially, that'll just give you an API key that you can just paste there, and you can paste that into a terminal line, and it can go and remove that. In fact, I'll just move it now. I'll just put it as X. And then after building, you can use the playwright skill to render the page, screenshot it, and self-critique against Impeccable's anti-patterns sort of framework before declaring the work that's finished. Now, the anti-patterns that I never want to see, I've just told it what I've seen, from my opinion, seeing AI slop, which is basically those interfont Arial kind of fonts. I don't want those purple, pinky sort of Gemini gradients. I don't want the cards nested in cards, etc., etc. Now, this is kind of just in my general Claude.md file for SEO. Whenever I create a website, I wanted to do basic SEO on top of it at the very end, just so we could start to rank on Google when we actually do, or when we go through the process of adding it to the Google Search Console. So I've said for any public-facing website or landing page, not internal tools, dashboards, or admin UIs, you must run the SEO skill before considering the work complete, which I've added. And then I said the minimum required SEO output before sign-off is all of this stuff mentioned here. And so if it is missing, it'll go back and add all of that stuff, particularly if there are blog articles as well. Now, I've just said other skills available are this list here that I've added. So like some Superbase stuff and some OpenSpec stuff as well. Now, that's not really the main part. It's just if it needs it, for example. But the main stuff is really here for the front end requirements. And obviously all of this stuff about being concise and making sure that it's really efficient, because obviously if it's this long-winded stuff that could be reduced to 50 lines instead of 200, we're obviously going to want to lean the code up as much as possible. So that is basically my usual Claude.md file. I hope that was insightful to you guys and maybe could give you some ideas about what you could incorporate into your own Claude.md file. You just find that by going to your .claude file on your desktop, wherever you're holding it, or wherever you're storing it, and it should just be the capital Claude.md file in the root of that repository. So let's go back to the Claude Code session, and let's see what it's been able to do in the meantime. So it's currently up to building the classify.ts file, and that is still going. So this will take a while, particularly because our thing is 447 lines long. So I'm not actually going to make you guys sit through all of this. I'm going to pause it here, and I'm going to come back when it is all done, and then I'll show you what it produced. All right, and we are back. So Claude has successfully gone through and finished its entire list, and these are all of the summaries and stuff it did do. Now, all we need to do in order to see the dashboard is just come over to the terminal and run nmp run dev, and from there it's going to open up a link for us, and then we can click that localhost, and it'll open up into a new tab. Let me transfer my screen over so you guys can see what I can see. So obviously right now the UI looks trash, and we're just gonna, I can't bear to look at that. So I'm going to screenshot what Claude said, because that UI is just horrible. And I'm gonna say, using all of your UX UI design skills in the Claude.md file. It never gets the Claude transcription correct. I want you to massively improve this dashboard because it looks bland and dark and boring. Try and make it light and interesting. Now, to be fair, I do remember in the prompt on the MD file, I did say something about making it like, I said blue accent. I said dark theme. So that was my bad. So let's go through quickly. Oh, let's send that off and let's also review what it did. Oh, whoops. I didn't bring you guys back with me. Whoopsie days. All right. So let's have a look at what Claude said. So it said, did the first question was, did the FICRL scrape pass all 25 listings clearly? And it got 24 out of 25. Now, it got 25 unique JK values, which doesn't really matter. All of the stuff does not matter. And neither does any of this. So it did successfully spit out a confidence score, which is great. And then it gave us some sample personalization on the outputs front as well, which is good to know. So let's let this window go and improve the UI of it so it actually looks somewhat presentable and it's not a pain to look at. I was looking for a product.md file. Oh, I see. It's going to go run through the whole impeccable database. But I think while that's doing that, let's just quickly revisit everything. So it basically took all of this 450 odd brief build. Oh, cool. So now it's going to ask me what I want. Let's go with, let's try this. And I'm just seeing it, no one else. So let's submit those. But I think it's pretty cracked nonetheless how it managed to basically one prompt all of this stuff, which is why I'm going to keep stressing to you guys. I'm going to beg you, please do not just copy and paste Claude desktop or Claude browser prompts into Claude Code. Actually think about what you're going to build before you go and build it. Lay out a very clear .md file, call it whatever you want, whether it's a brief, build brief, whatever, and lay out and get Claude to write it for you even. Get it to list out what exactly you want and be really specific, because that way you're going to get the best quality output from Claude Code the first time around. You're not going to have to burn through all of these context tokens by just going back and forth and pasting this and pasting that. Now, obviously, the UI isn't great, but that's fine. But that's only the second prompt. Can you imagine if you didn't have like a .md file and you were going to go and paste all of that like one by one? You would have absolutely destroyed like your entire context window. And also you probably would have missed details as well, because it wasn't all laid out in logical fashion like this. So that is my plea to you for this video. Make sure whenever you go and build something, make sure you think about it very carefully before you go and do so, and that you structure it so that your build process is far more simple and far more streamlined. Now, obviously, we've been recording now for like 40 minutes thereabouts, but that's just because I've gone ahead and explained why I've done what I've done in the .md file. If you just got Claude to generate it and everything, it should have taken you like 5 to 10 minutes. Sure, we'll just do the recommended stuff for now. So that should be the last question it has in terms of the front end. And then after this round, then we're going to go and run it and see how it goes. Yes, well, that was fine. Okay, cool. So while that's finishing up, let's just recap to the part one of this video to basically just why are we doing this? Like, I think it's always important to come back to the whole point of why, like, a lot of AI gurus on YouTube, like, love to show you this tool and that tool because it's, like, cool, whatever that means. But in my opinion, if it doesn't make you money, it's kind of pointless. So the reason why I built this tool and I thought about doing this video for you guys is because I was thinking a couple of weeks ago, like, where would people starting out get leads from? Like, if they're not doing Upwork and going through the freelance route, where else could they possibly be finding people who would want jobs? And so obviously I thought, like, if you're going down sort of an employee route or work for free route, obviously these big companies are probably starting to get a little drip of AI, at least from their top management down. And so they're probably going to be searching for a job for someone to come in and start to hire an AI guy without having to pay like AI agency routes. So then my thought was, how about I go and scrape all of those job listings from Indeed or whatever platform you're going to use, and then let's go and target them and say, hey, listen, I saw your job ad for this, and I built you X, Y, and Z. What do you think? I'd love to set up a time and go through with it with you. Not even asking for anything up front, just saying, hey, I've sent you this. Let me know if this is of interest, and I can send it over, and I can go through it with you. So that little design brief should be all done. Yes, go and rebuild that. Okay, so hopefully the UI should look way better now after that has gone through. And then we can run the URL, and then hopefully if it produces a good result, then we are done. So that is basically a brief rundown on how to structure a brief.md file or an MD file properly to begin with, and then literally how to use Firecrawl, which is the most cracked scraper we have currently on the market, how to grab those details. Now, Firecrawl also has agents as well. Now, I'm going to do a Claude breakdown for beginners to go from 0 to 100 in the next video, which is going to be another long video. But after that, if you guys want me to make a video on agents specifically to do with Firecrawl, because I've seen some pretty cool stuff, which I thought it'd be cool to share, let me know in the comments below, and I will come out with a video showing you some cool use cases about how you can actually use them in your business to help make you more money. So now it's just confirmed all of those things inside of that impeccable reference folder. So hopefully that should be done in the next couple of minutes. Oh wow, it's already gone through that. Very good. Let me check. Let's see if it's done anything with the UI yet. Oh, something's happening. Sorry, you guys can't see my Chrome tab just yet. When it's finished, I'll show you the final result. Come on, still going. I can see these these terminal entries down the bottom happening, so it's clearly refreshing the page and repulling everything together, although it's taking a while to write out that layout TypeScript file, which is surprising considering it's literally only just a landing page. I'm actually going to test out how good Codex is as well for coding something like this, and I'm going to do a comparison video between the two. Let me know if you guys want me to cover anything specifically in that video, because I've been playing around with the image gen from Codex, and the type of stuff that it can produce, like even from a thumbnail standpoint, is pretty sick. I personally think it's above Gemini now. It's surpassed Gemini in terms of its new image generation model. It's pretty close, but I think OpenAI, what they've managed to do, they were falling behind for a time. Like Claude was releasing Opus 4.7, Claude Design, and then 5.5 came out with the new image gen model and basically just retook the lead. So, wow, that's very bright. I hope Claude is going to see what it's done and fix it, because it doesn't look too... much better. Okay, sick. For those of you who know what Claude Design is, you're going to see the new result, which is mainly because of the... what was it? Because of the impeccable stuff. And you're gonna see what I mean when you say it looks similar to the Claude lean style. If you guys viewed some of the templates from Claude Design, you'll see a couple that look very similar to this. It actually looked like, I think, one of the calculators that you could play around with, like the old vintage style and stuff like that. It looks pretty similar to this. Let's see if it's going to change anything else. I think that should be good. Okay, I'll transfer you. Yes, okay, it's all done now. So let me move you guys back across with me to Chrome as it's in its final stages. So look at the difference between the old dark and gloomy thing versus this nice bright, much more user-friendly interface. So we're going to go ahead and scrape this page now. I'm just waiting for Claude to finalize some of these final changes. It's just in the final stages of polishing and viewport checking the playwright cross viewport stuff, which it should be done any any minute now. And hopefully when we run the Claude, or sorry, not the Claude, when we run that scraper URL, hopefully it should return those jobs in the format that we're hoping it will. It is definitely taking its time. I think it's so it's in the last stages now. So the playwright stuff, which I also added, if you guys remember back to my claude.md file, I also added the ability to playwright test all of the screens basically. So when it was done, a code, it could open up a virtual browser and just double check all of the screen sizing. So whether it would work on mobile, tablet, Chrome. So as you can see, oh, you can't see actually. Let me bring you back to anti-gravity for 1 minute. As you can see here, it says OK screens written to. And so it's created a debugging file straight for the different screen sizes so that it can accurately make it responsive between each respective screen size. And at the end of that, it's just reviewing the images that it took, or that screenshotted for itself, but we should be done. It's just being very thorough. I don't think there's anything else to go. I haven't seen anything in the terminal for a hot minute. So it's thinking a lot. I wonder how much Claude usage I've gone through making this video. We'll check that at the end, actually. I'll pull that up now while we're waiting, because I'm very curious. Now, even though I haven't gone back and forth, like with destroying the context window, it still went through a lot of work trying to go through and address each point inside of that video. So I'm on the max plan. Yeah, see, look at that. Let me bring you to my Claude. Check this out. So in this video alone, I've already used 53% of my Claude usage. So I'm only on the max plan, so I've got 5 times the usage. But even still, this project has used a significant amount of Claude usage. Although it was more efficient, you probably would have used more than this if you tried to like prompt Claude Code one by one with each individual stage. So I definitely think we got a far better result doing what we did. So let's check in. It's still going. So it's double checking those final images. Let's have a look at where it's looking. So it's, you have to appreciate the thoroughness though. Like it's literally gone and taken a screenshot. Check this out, of each individual screen size to double check everything, and it's going to adjust accordingly. That's a great skill. You guys should add that straight away, because it's definitely going to save you a lot of time having to go back and test screen sizing and whatnot. And now it's making the necessary changes, which is fantastic. So yeah, like I said, the desktop is strong, but the mobile meta strip was dangling a little bit, so it went ahead and fixed all that stuff up. So it's going to retake that screenshot now after we did all the polishing, and fingers crossed we should be done and ready to run this final test. I don't know why it's looking at the desktop again. The desktop's fine. Although in all fairness, it's probably just double checking that it didn't screw up anything from the desktop end in the process. So let me bring you guys, as we're getting ready to come back to Chrome and actually run this thing. It's just fixing some final styling stuff, but I'm tempted just to run the scan anyway, even though it's still finishing and running its final little tests. Isn't that funny? It found an M- fix somewhere in the code, and it went back through all of the global.css to find it and then replace it. I mean, and that's the other thing, like if you actually have a solid like claude.md file, it will be thorough. And that's why, like, when I see people who just whinge and moan, this is the other point we'll make before we actually go and try and test this. When people whinge and moan and they say, oh, my AI is giving crap outputs, it's like, yeah, dude, because your inputs are crap. It's a very, like, causation, correlation kind of relationship. If you give it a crap prompt, it'll produce a crap output. Like, if you give it a good prompt, it'll produce a great output. It's like an employee, which is kind of how you have to treat it, particularly in the beginning. It's like if you welcomed a new employee into a job, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. If you gave it like 2 to 3 sentences, like of instruction and said, off you go, do you think they're going to do it very well? Probably not, right? But if you give it like all these documents, which have been compiled full of SOPs and everything, it's going to produce a much better result the first time, because it has actually had time to read through all the information that you have, and then it's well informed to go and make the decisions on its own. So I think now it's successfully stopped the task. Just to show you guys everything. Yes, very good. So now it has completely done the rebuild and it's just telling me what it's touched. And now it is time to run. So let's go back to Claude and let's have a look at everything. So let's see, first run of this, let's see how it goes. I always have such little faith with these things. Like I'm always expecting there to be like a 404 somewhere, which is why like I always like have the console out. For you guys who aren't web devs, don't worry about this, but for my tech guys out there, I'm literally like staring at this screen, like waiting for something to happen. I'm like on the edge of my seat, ready to see like some red thing pop up in this panel here. But that's good. It's great. Wow. Let's go. It did test and it did get it the first time. Isn't that great? Super. Bravo. First try. Sick. Literally, it got everything and... Oh, sorry, I could copy that. That's great. And then if we click this link here, we can view the thing after we get past this bot protection, which... Site operations manager, concierge, primary care. Yep. Super. And just like that, everyone, we have successfully built a very useful tracking app to find companies that are willing to pay and literally have their hand out and say, here, take my money, please. I want you to come and help my operations. Now, you can build this tool. It doesn't really matter what LinkedIn URL you're going for. You could literally just paste it also in that .md file, so Claude Code knows which URL to go after. And you could even just give it a whole type of niche. Like I'm looking to go after, I don't know, construction people with these same job titles. And it could just scour through the entire Indeed and just pull everything, every single entry from that database. Now, obviously, I only said 24 leads just for the purpose of this video because we're already at like an hour long, 50 minutes or so. But this was just to give you an idea. And the fact that it also wrote the opener as well. So I hope this video has been useful for you guys. This is how I'm starting to go about creating and looking at my leads as well, because it's not very efficient for us to be going through all of these and curating and creating them for one, and then going ahead and creating these like 1 second lines, which AI can help us do. Now, think about this at scale. This is where the tricky part really comes in. Yes, it's okay to do 24 by yourself, but are you really going to sit there and do over 200? No, that would be stupid. So then we can literally just copy and paste these, and you can just use another automation, whether you're using Claude Desktop and using Cowork, or you're using OpenAI's Codex. And then you can use that as well to use your browser and extract all that data, or you can send it to another project. So with that being said, thank you for watching this video. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments about anything you'd like me to cover in the future. I'd be happy to make a video about that. So if you're a business owner and you need more clients, that's what we do. We run Done For You cold email. Our campaigns are hitting 22% positive reply rates right now. If you'd like us to do the same for you, the link to apply is in the description below. And make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the daily videos we're pumping out on the channel. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video.